He goes, that's what I want to talk to you about. He goes, the money you gave me, I worked really hard and I got a scholarship. I don't need your money anymore.
For more than 30 years, America believed it knew Jay Leno. Every night, millions saw the same image. A familiar face behind a desk. Clean jokes. Perfect timing. A man who never caused trouble, never slowed down, never seemed to change. He was television's safest pair of hands. Reliable, predictable, almost boring in his consistency. But that version of Jay Leno was only half the story. When the studio lights went dark and the audience went home, he did not rest. He did not retreat into luxury or silence. Instead, he stepped into a second world that smelled of gasoline and scorched metal. A place of engines, tools, fire, and risk. A place where mistakes burned skin and broke bones. A place where applause meant nothing and only function mattered. For 3 decades, these two lives ran side by side. One in front of cameras, one hidden behind steel doors. No interviews revealed it. No scandals exposed it. Even those closest to him barely understood how completely divided his existence had become. Then, the accidents began. The burns, the fractures, the court documents, the quiet responsibility no joke could soften. And suddenly, the question was no longer how Jay Leno worked so hard. It was why he never stopped. If you think you know Jay Leno, stay with us and discover the life he never showed the world. Long before America knew Jay Leno as a television icon, his world was small, quiet, and ruled by routine. He was born in 1,950 inches, New Rochelle, New York, into a family that valued work over words and self-reliance over comfort. There was no sense of glamour in the Leno household. Life was practical. You worked. You showed up. You did not complain. His father, Angelo Leno, was an Italian-American insurance salesman who believed dignity came from earning your way. His mother, Catherine, originally from Scotland, was gentle but firm, grounded in realism rather than sentiment. Jay watched them navigate life without excess, and that restraint quietly shaped him. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was assumed. When the family later settled in Andover, Massachusetts, Jay's universe narrowed even further. A modest house, a quiet neighborhood, and most importantly, an old garage. While other kids played outside, Jay gravitated toward broken machines. He took things apart not to destroy them, but to understand them. Engines, tools, loose bolts. Grease under his fingernails became familiar long before microphones ever were. Those afternoons in the garage trained something deeper than mechanical skill. They taught patience, focus, the ability to sit with a problem until it made sense. Years later, Jay would admit that the feeling of fixing an engine was eerily similar to fixing a joke. You keep working on it until it runs smoothly. Until it finally works. Even as a child, Jay was learning how to build things quietly, methodically, and alone. And without realizing it, he was already preparing for a life that would demand endurance far more than applause. When Jay entered Emerson College in Boston in the late 1960s, nothing about his path suggested future stardom. He chose to study speech therapy, a practical field rooted in structure and discipline, not performance or fame. Yet even then, comedy was already pulling at him quietly, persistently, the way engines once had. Emerson gave Jay something more valuable than a classroom. It gave him proximity. Boston, in the early 1970s, was becoming a fertile ground for stand-up comedy, filled with small bars, experimental stages, and audiences willing to listen. Instead of waiting for permission, Jay created his own space. Inside his dormitory, he founded the school's first comedy club. Folding chairs, improvised stages, No spotlight, just repetition and work. This was also when his lifelong rhythm truly locked into place. By day, Jay worked in garages near campus. Real mechanical work, oil changes, repairs, long hours on concrete floors. By night, he performed comedy in bars, clubs, and student halls. Sometimes the same day stretched into both worlds, without pause. Grease under his nails in the afternoon, a microphone in his hand at night. There was no romance in it, no illusion of balance. Jay slept little, worked constantly, and learned how to function while tired. Comedy did not replace labor, it joined it. The discipline he learned, fixing machines carried directly onto the stage. Timing, precision, control. If a joke failed, he adjusted it the same way he would a faulty engine. By the time he graduated in 1972, Jay was no longer experimenting. Without realizing it, he had built the foundation for a life where rest was optional. Routine was sacred, and working non-stop felt normal. In 1973, Jay Leno packed his life into a car and drove west to Los Angeles, the city where comedy careers either ignited or quietly disappeared. He arrived with no agent, no safety net, and no illusions. Hollywood did not welcome him. It ignored him. Jay settled in Burbank, close to television studios but far from opportunity. During the day, he worked in garages, fixing cars for steady but modest pay. At night, he drove across the city to perform stand-up at places like the Comedy Store. The stages were crowded. The competition was brutal. Most comics waited for a break. Jay waited for nothing. He worked. Money was tight, but his habits never changed. He saved relentlessly. He avoided debt. He refused long breaks. While others treated comedy as nightlife, Jay treated it like shift work. Perform, leave, wake up. Some nights, he performed multiple sets. Other nights, he bombed completely. Either way, the routine stayed intact. What set Jay apart was not brilliance or reinvention. It was reliability. Club owners learned he would always show up. Mechanics knew he would always finish the job. While other comedians chased fame, Jay chased consistency. Slowly, almost invisibly, it compounded. This was the period where the two lives fully overlapped. The grease, the steel, the engines, and the microphone all existed in the same week, sometimes the same day. Los Angeles did not change him. It reinforced what he already was. By the time television began to notice Jay Leno, he was not chasing opportunity anymore. He was already conditioned for it. After nearly 4 years grinding through clubs in Los Angeles, opportunity did not arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, in the form of a phone call inviting Jay Leno to perform a short stand-up set on The Tonight Show. On the 2nd of March 1977, he stepped onto a national stage for the first time. There was no spectacle, no edgy reinvention. His set was tight, observational, and steady. The jokes landed cleanly. The rhythm never rushed. Most importantly, he looked comfortable. That calm presence caught the attention of Johnny Carson, a man who valued timing and discipline above flash. Carson did not praise him on air. He did something more meaningful. He invited him back. From that moment on, Jay became a recurring guest. Each appearance was treated the same way he treated a garage job. Prepare, deliver, leave. He never overstayed, never chased applause, never tried to dominate the room. Producers noticed something rare in television: reliability. Throughout the late 1,970 seconds and into the 1,980 seconds, Jay began appearing across television. He wrote for sitcoms, took small acting roles, filled in for other hosts. Every opportunity was met with the same rule he had lived by for years: show up early, do the work, do not complain. While his face became familiar to the public, His life behind the scenes remained unchanged. Days still smelled of motor oil. Nights still ended under stage lights. Fame was growing, but Jay kept the same pace, as if success were something fragile that could vanish the moment he slowed down. This was not ambition in the traditional sense. It was survival instinct refined into habit. By the early 1980 seconds, Jay Leno had become something rare in television. He was not controversial, not flashy, not divisive. He was dependable, and in an industry built on ego and volatility, that mattered more than brilliance. When Johnny Carson began taking more frequent breaks from The Tonight Show, NBC needed someone who could step in without unsettling the audience. Jay became that person. Again and again, he was asked to guest host. He arrived prepared. He respected the format. He never tried to reinvent the desk or outshine the legacy. He treated the chair as borrowed property. Behind the scenes, executives took note. Jay never canceled, never arrived late, never made demands. While other comedians negotiated contracts and clashed with producers, Jay simply worked. Morning production meetings, afternoon script reviews, evening tapings. Then, after all of that, he would still drive across Los Angeles to perform stand-up at a small club for a separate audience that barely knew his television status. This double workload was invisible to viewers, but it forged a reputation inside NBC that mattered more than ratings alone. Jay was safe. Jay was stable. Jay would not embarrass the network. But safety came with a cost. As rumors began circulating that Carson was nearing retirement, Jay found himself in a strange position. He was everywhere, yet never acknowledged as the obvious successor. The pressure was silent, but constant. Every guest host appearance felt like an audition that could never end. Jay did not campaign. He did not lobby. He did what he had always done. He worked harder, longer hours, fewer days off. He once admitted that during this period, he averaged nearly 18 hours of work a day. Success was close, but so was isolation. This was not the triumph phase yet. This was the waiting room. And waiting, for someone like Jay Leno, was often harder than struggling. On the 25th of May, 1992, Jay Leno walked onto the stage of The Tonight Show as its official host for the first time. Johnny Carson was gone. The desk was no longer borrowed. It was his. What should have felt like victory, instead, felt like exposure. Carson's audience was loyal, protective, and deeply skeptical of change. Many critics framed the transition as a downgrade. Newspapers called it NBC's gamble. Late-night television turned into a battlefield overnight, with David Letterman positioned as the rebellious alternative and Jay cast as the corporate choice. Jay did not respond publicly. He responded with labor. He tightened the show's rhythm. Monologues stayed clean and accessible. Jokes came from gas prices, family life, daily frustrations. He positioned himself not as a star talking down to America, but as a working man talking with them. Behind the scenes, the workload was punishing. Production meetings in the morning, rewrites all afternoon, taping at night, then stand-up shows afterward to keep his edge sharp. He averaged nearly 18 hours of work a day. Weekends disappeared. Vacations did not exist. By 1995, the strategy worked. Ratings climbed past Letterman. More than 5 million viewers tuned in nightly. Advertising revenue surged. NBC had its winner. But success did not bring relief. It brought silence. Jay later admitted that the higher he climbed, the fewer people he could trust. Decisions were his alone. Mistakes were his alone. Praise felt distant. Criticism felt amplified. At his father's memorial in 1994, Jay spoke a line that startled many in the room. "It's lonely at the top." The sentence was not metaphorical. It was a diagnosis. By the early 2000s, Jay's position at the top of late-night television looked unshakable. Ratings were strong. Advertisers were loyal. The Tonight Show had become a machine that printed stability for NBC. And that stability was precisely what made the next decision so dangerous. In 2004, NBC announced a long-term plan that stunned the industry. Conan O'Brien would inherit The Tonight Show in 2009. The announcement came 5 years early. Framed as a respectful transition meant to prevent chaos. On paper, it sounded reasonable. In reality, it planted a countdown clock inside Jay's career. For the next 5 years, every joke Jay told carried an expiration date. Every contract negotiation was shadowed by the knowledge that the chair beneath him was already promised to someone else. Publicly, he accepted it. Privately, the situation cut deep. Jay had not failed. He had not declined. He was being replaced simply because time had passed. On the 29th of May 2009, Jay hosted his final episode after 17 years. The farewell was restrained. No bitterness, no spectacle. He thanked the audience and walked off stage. Weeks later, NBC launched The Jay Leno Show in prime time, an experiment designed to keep him in the network ecosystem without displacing Conan. The experiment failed. Ratings collapsed. Local affiliates revolted. NBC panicked. And once again, stability gave way to fear. Behind closed doors, executives made a choice that would fracture reputations. Conan would be moved. Jay would return. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Fans accused Jay of betrayal. Comedians turned him into a villain. Late-night television became a morality play. And Jay was cast as the antagonist, whether he wanted the role or not. In March 2010, he reclaimed The Tonight Show desk. The ratings recovered. The damage did not. Jay rarely spoke about that period afterward. But those close to him noticed something had hardened. He trusted institutions less. He relied even more heavily on routine. And when the lights went off, he retreated further into the one place that had never betrayed him: the garage. When Jay Leno finally stepped away from The Tonight Show in 2014, many expected a slow retreat. A victory lap, occasional appearances, a quiet retirement earned after decades of dominance. That assumption misunderstood him completely. Television had always been one half of his identity. The other half had been waiting patiently for more than 30 years. Away from studio lights, Jay Leno returned to the world that had never judged him, never competed for ratings, and never demanded reinvention. His garage in Burbank was not a hobby room. It was a working ecosystem. Steel floors stained with oil, tools arranged by function. Engines disassembled and rebuilt, not for display, but for understanding. In 2015, Jay Leno's garage became a full series. Cameras followed him through restorations, test drives, and conversations with engineers rather than celebrities. The tone was different from television. No punchlines chasing applause. No monologues. Just curiosity. Jay often said cars made him quiet. What he meant was deeper. Machines did not care about legacy. They did not resent success or envy survival. If something failed, there was a reason. If it worked, it earned trust. That logic had comforted him since childhood. The scale of the collection stunned the public when it became visible. More than 180 cars and 160 motorcycles, many of them rare, experimental, or historically significant, steam cars. Electric prototypes. Jet-powered experiments, each restored, documented, and driven. Nothing locked away behind ropes. Even after fame no longer demanded his time, Jay kept the same rhythm. Daytime in the garage. Nights on stage performing stand-up. Around 150 shows a year. Not for money, for calibration. He believed engines rusted when unused. People did too. What surprised longtime fans was not the size of the collection, but the clarity of purpose. This was never escape. It was alignment. The two lives that had once run in parallel were no longer separate. Television had given him a voice. Mechanics gave him balance. And as the years passed, that balance would be tested more brutally than anyone expected. By the time Jay entered his 70s, most people around him had already slowed down. He did the opposite. His routine hardened. 4 hours of sleep, 16 hours of work. No alcohol, no cigarettes, minimal sugar. Every day followed the same internal clock. Not because he feared aging, but because he believed motion was maintenance. Then, the accidents began. In November 2022, while repairing a 1,907 steam car inside his garage, a sudden fuel ignition sent flames across his face, hands, and chest. 2nd and 3rd degree burns. 10 days in a burn center. Multiple skin grafts. Images of his bandaged face shocked the public. Jay said almost nothing. When asked later, he summarized it with a single sentence: "My face was on fire." 2 months later, January 2023, another incident. Riding a vintage motorcycle, a wire stretched across the road caught him off guard. He crashed hard. Broken collarbone, 2 fractured ribs. Doctors advised rest. Jay returned to the stage within weeks, joking that he had cracked a few parts, but the engine still ran. Early 2024 brought a third blow. While filming a vehicle test, he slipped down an embankment nearly 18 meters deep. Broken wrist, bruised face. When help arrived, his first question was not about himself. It was whether the car was damaged. What stunned doctors was not just his recovery speed, but his refusal to pause. Jay did not frame these incidents as warnings. To him, they were occupational hazards. He had grown up in garages. Machines fought back sometimes. You fixed the problem and kept moving. To outsiders, this looked like stubbornness. To Jay, stopping felt more dangerous than injury. Work was not distraction. It was structure. Without it, he believed the system failed. But just as his body endured one test after another, life prepared a challenge no discipline could engineer away. In 2024, the most difficult chapter of Jay Leno's life did not unfold on a stage, in a garage, or under a spotlight. It appeared in court documents. After more than 4 decades of fiercely guarded privacy, Jay was forced to make something public he had spent a lifetime protecting. His wife, Mavis, had been diagnosed with progressive cognitive decline. The condition was no longer subtle. Medical reports described advancing dementia that required full-time supervision. In moments that cut deeper than any accident, there were times when she no longer recognized the man she had lived beside since 1980. On the 1st of April 2024, a Los Angeles court granted Jay legal guardianship over Mavis's medical and financial decisions. The paperwork was clinical. The reality was not. For a man who had mastered discipline, schedules, and mechanical certainty, this was a form of helplessness he could not repair with tools or routines. There was no part to replace, no system to optimize, only presence. Jay did not retreat. He adjusted. He kept their daily rhythms intact. Familiar routes, familiar events, small outings, repetition became comfort. He continued bringing her to limited public appearances, believing that routine anchored what memory could no longer hold. When asked what love meant now, his answer was stripped of humor and performance. Love is taking care of each other when one person can't. Friends noticed the shift. Jay still worked, still toured, still filmed, but the center of gravity had moved. Work was no longer just identity. It was stability, something predictable he could hold on to, while the most important thing in his life became uncertain. For the first time, the two lives he had balanced for decades collided. The tireless worker, the private husband, the discipline that once kept him moving, now became the reason he could stay. This was not a battle he could win. Only one he could honor. By 2025, Jay Leno was 75 years old, an age when most men had long since stepped away from schedules, deadlines, and risk. Jay did the opposite. His stand-up calendar listed nearly 170 shows across the United States. Small theaters, university halls, casino rooms. He traveled constantly, often flying out in the morning, performing at night, and returning before sunrise. There were no elaborate stage effects, no dramatic entrances. He walked on stage, adjusted the microphone, and spoke like a man who had just come from work, because he usually had. Jay Leno's garage continued to expand online, shifting focus toward electric vehicles, alternative fuels, and new automotive technology. He did not chase trends. He tested what interested him. He kept only the cars that made him feel calm. As he put it, he did not collect to impress. He collected to understand. Physicians who monitored his recovery after multiple accidents were quietly stunned. Jay almost never missed a day of work. He slept 4 hours a night. He avoided alcohol, cigarettes, and sugar. His body carried scars, but his routine remained untouched. One doctor remarked that Jay was the only patient who seemed to heal faster because he refused to stop moving. Financially, he had nothing left to prove. Estimates placed his net worth around $450 million, with the car collection accounting for a fraction of it. He disliked award ceremonies, declined honorary appearances, said he preferred standing in a garage doorway watching exhaust smoke drift into the air. What changed was not his pace, but his clarity. Work was no longer ambition. It was maintenance, a way to stay grounded while caring for a wife whose memory was fading, a way to preserve identity when control elsewhere had disappeared. The stage and the garage were no longer separate lives. They had merged into one rhythm built on discipline, purpose, and presence. Jay Leno did not work to escape life. He worked to remain inside it. For 30 years, the public believed Jay Leno lived a simple story. A comedian, a host, a familiar face on television every night. What they never saw was that he was never defined by fame at all. Behind the cameras, Jay built a life anchored in labor, in grease-stained hands, in discipline learned early, in routines that never changed, even when success arrived. The stage gave him applause, but the garage gave him peace. One sharpened his voice, the other kept him grounded. Together, they formed a balance most people never achieve. As age, injury, and personal loss accumulated, Jay did not retreat. He narrowed his focus. Work became less about achievement and more about meaning. Fixing a car, telling a joke, caring for his wife, showing up every day without spectacle. Jay Leno's double life was never a secret identity. It was a survival system, a reminder that purpose does not come from status, but from consistency. That dignity is built through habits, and that staying alive, truly alive, sometimes means refusing to stop doing the work that made you who you are. In the end, the two worlds did not compete. They fused. And what remains is not a legend, but a working man who never stopped choosing motion over stillness. If this story gave you a new perspective on Jay Leno, please like the video to support our work. Subscribe to the channel for more untold stories about the lives people thought they already knew. And let us know in the comments whose hidden story you want us to uncover next.